Thank you for listening to one of Rossendale Radio's Play It Again episodes. This interview took place on the morning of the 28th of October 2020 and was first broadcast on Rossendale Radio. In this episode, Valley Breakfast's Pete Sweetmore talks to Alison Barnes, leader of Rossendale Borough Council.
104.7 Rossendale Radio.
Delighted to welcome my guest of the day, who's popped in a little earlier than normal, but we're delighted to welcome. Shall we be formal and call you Councillor Alison Barnes, the leader of Rossendale Borough Council? Hello.
Hello there. That's very formal, isn't it? Good morning, Peter.
Well, for the rest of it, it's Alison.
Of course, it's Alison.
We know each other too well for that.
Yeah, indeed.
So thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
It's great of you to come in. I think before we get into, we've had a few questions sent in, but I think before we get into those, how on earth has it been being a council leader over this since March, dealing with COVID and everything? You must have had some unbelievable challenges.
It's been incredibly busy, actually. The pressure it's put on our very little council, because it is, I always say, it's the fifth smallest district council in the northwest.
Right.
And we've picked up all sorts of tasks, as you can imagine. We're knee deep in the track and trace at the minute. We are supplementing the national scheme. So all those folk in Rossendale that the national scheme has not been able to contact, and there are many, we're picking up that task, and we are successful in contacting 60% of them, so that's working well. We've got an advisory role, of course, or environmental health officers advising businesses and organisations on what they can and can't do. We've got an enforcement role, of course, telling people off and stopping them doing things that they shouldn't be doing, complete with serving orders to close, as we have on one or two establishments in Rawtenstall. And of course we're trying to support our vulnerable residents as well. And doing all of that while we're keeping the day job going.
And it's still doing all the other tasks that the council have to do as well.
I think it's 84 different services we provide for local residents. Clearly we've got to keep as much of that on the go as we can.
You can. And I suppose it doesn't help with the rules forever changing every blooming week or whatever.
What frustrates me is government tend to make big announcements, and literally they say it. They've not told us already, or had any dialogue with us about it. So we then are playing catch up for the next 2 or 3 days, trying to understand what they meant by that, what the rules are, what the guidance is, how that should be applied, because they come down heavy on us if we don't do it exactly as they want us to do it.
But if you don't understand what they want you to do,
well, and they can be weeks rolling that guidance out, and I think people get frustrated with us because they think your website's not up to date. What are you doing? And often we're waiting, so we put a holding page up, but we're waiting for all this stuff to fall out, of
come
government
down from up above.
Absolutely. I mean, a classic was the discretionary grant for businesses, and by the time they finished telling us what we should do with that, there was no discretion left. It was all down to what they wanted us to do with that money.
They just prescribed it rather than advised it.
And the way the rules work is, if we give a penny the wrong way, then it's down to us. It comes out of Rossendale Borough Council funds. So we've got to adhere to those rules as closely as we can. But clearly we want to act quickly because we know our businesses and our residents are depending on it.
Right, and that's interesting because that was one of the questions that had come up actually about these discretionary grants to them. So who is it who kind of makes that decision? You've got the prescription of said this is what you can do with businesses. You then, do people apply to you? How does it work?
It depends what it is, but the business grants is an application process, and we're in another round of that as well, of course, with the Tier 3 funding. I think we've got 87 businesses that have had to close under Tier 3 regulations in Lancashire. Now, government have said those businesses will not get anything until they've been closed for 2 weeks.
Right.
And that 2 weeks is coming up on us fast.
Right.
We've not received money from government yet, but we're getting ready to roll that money out on Monday.
Right.
So we've not received it, but we're looking to. We've put the form in place so people can at least fill it out and get it back to us, so that as soon as
you get the money, you can pass it on.
We can pass it on.
Yeah. Which again must be blooming frustrating when you're waiting, because obviously, as a council and people like yourself who know people all over the borough, you know these people.
Well, they contact me directly as well, you know. And to be honest, you know, I don't know how businesses are coping, frankly. I don't know how families are coping with much of this. So we want to help as soon as we possibly can. So it's quite frustrating, really.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I'm sure I certainly feel heartened about it, I'm sure you do, how the community have come together, particularly this week with it being half term, and the number of people, who are providing food and meals and support, it's just phenomenal, isn't it?
Well, I was talking about this at the Community Association meeting last night, and I could feel myself filling up, really. Extraordinary. We've got such amazing communities and community spirit in this valley, you know. People just respond, and it's been no different over the last few days in terms of the trying to feed our youngsters over half term, those that would be eligible for free school meals. Lots of the usual people, the food groups that are out there already, and we're, as a council, working closely with them to support what they're doing. But lots of new people coming into it as well. We've got the folk from St James the Less. They're doing a lot. Anna's up in Weir. We've got the D&T rooms over in Haslingden. They're doing their bit as well.
So there's literally people right across the whole valley.
It's really, really heartening.
And I think one of the things that's come out basically over the last 24 hours is the recognition that, it's great that this is happening this week. And there's been, I wouldn't call it a knee-jerk reaction, perhaps an emotional reaction from people to support. And I belong to the Rossendale Community Support Network as an example, and we're saying, let's look forward. We need to look forward to, first of all, the Christmas holidays next.
Absolutely.
But then beyond that, because inevitably there's going to be some degree of support needed. And obviously with yourselves as the council, we know that we'll have the backing of you and your colleagues.
Absolutely. And we've been working with our food groups now for some time, because as a council we picked up the issue of school holiday hunger about 2 or 3 years ago. Our Overview and Scrutiny Committee did a piece of work on that. So we've been working with local food groups since then to see how we can support them to deliver for our youngsters. And unfortunately, it isn't just about school holidays. It is a much bigger issue.
And like you say, with COVID and redundancies and all that's happening with people, they're being dropped into a situation that they've never expected. And it's not something you can plan for, is it? You know?
No.
But it's great that support is there, and particularly from the Rossendale community.
Absolutely.
I know you know there are a brilliant lot of people out there.
There certainly are.
Great stuff. Okay, we've got a few questions. We've got you till about 9:30, haven't we?
Yes.
So,
I should be all right for a few minutes longer. Actually.
Right. Okay. Well, we're heading rapidly up towards the news at 9:00, so we'll have to go with that. One question we've got is: have you any thoughts on the bingo hall? It says, I'll read what it says. Thoughts on the bingo hall, please, Alison. Is it viable to restore it, in your opinion? If not, what's the next step, bearing in mind that a demolition application was once refused on the basis that it's a listed building? That's the bingo hall in Bacup.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult with some of these large empty buildings, particularly those that are listed. Mm-hmm. I mean, people will know the mill just up the road from
just on Burnley Road there. In Bacup, Waterside Mill,
of course. We've been working on that for a long time, and it's been falling down for a long time. And have we been able to convince English Heritage that we need to take drastic action? No, we haven't. So we've jumped through absolutely every hoop. And I think where we're going to, we know it's not viable to renovate it. You know, the costs of doing that. just don't work.
No, it's just you've got to balance it out.
And we've got a similar situation, I think, with the bingo hall in the sense of large listed. I'm not sure it is listed. I think this inside's listed, not the outside.
Right,
if I remember.
But again, that adds to the complications, doesn't it?
If I remember rightly, and it might not be listed. Actually, it might be listable, and it's not been.
Right.
But we are. There is some good news because, of course, we've got the Heritage Action Zone funding in Bacup. Not a huge amount of money. It's £1 million directly from government that needs to be matched, funded to the tune of an additional 2 million by the private sector. So we are working with the building owners of some of these large buildings to see whether we can work up a scheme for to take them forward. I think we're probably nearer a solution for that particular building than we have been before, and I think it's a case of watching this space.
And I think that's it. It's probably can get a bit frustrating perhaps for listeners. You know, all this work is going on behind the scenes in the background, and people are doing their absolute utmost to do something with these, and the wheels grind ever so slowly. So therefore, when you can, you probably take great delight in making some of these announcements and say, we've got this building and we've saved that and we've done this or whatever, and with your support.
Regeneration, 5 to 15 years. We've been at it for 10 years and we've made some headway,
some inroads,
but we're nowhere near where there's a lot to do around the valley.
Okay, let's have a break for a little bit of music, because like I said, we're rapidly heading towards the news. We'll get the news out the way and then we'll talk more after that.
Dedicated to the Rossendale Valley, this is your very own Rossendale Radio.
104.7, welcome to the Valley Breakfast with me, Pete Sweetmore. Straight on back with my guest of the day, Alison Barnes, leader of Rossendale Borough Council. Loads of questions, and I've just realised I've not clicked onto it. Bear with me while I just do that. Right, a message we've had from Emily Ashworth. Morning, Emily, thanks for tuning in. She said, hi Pete, I noticed you sort of kind of broached the subject of funding. Could Alison provide more of an insight on what help is available to businesses that are not required to close but are struggling due to the restrictions?
Thanks, Pete, and thanks, Emily, for your question. I think it's very, very pertinent at the moment. Clearly, what we've got is a very fast-moving situation. It won't be lost on people that parts of London, in fact, the whole of London, went into Tier 2 last week, or perhaps late the week before, and that those businesses are being supported in that by government. So there is this anomaly now that if you're actually in Tier 2, you, as a business, you're probably better off than you are being in Tier 3, because you have the choice on whether you want to close or not. So we're very aware of that anomaly, and again, residents and businesses will be aware that Lancashire leaders negotiated a deal with government a couple of weeks ago, £30 million in cash to help support our businesses, and we're all busily working up schemes to do that as we speak, and we're all very, very aware of these businesses that aren't required to close, but the pandemic is impacting on the business, so we are hoping to recognise that in a scheme that should be announced later this week. Rossendale's share of that 30 million is going to be around £1 million, because it's all based on population numbers, just over £1 million actually. And whilst it sounds like an awful lot of money, it doesn't go very far.
It's not, no.
It doesn't go very far when you start handing it out to businesses who are suffering. So I don't want to raise expectation that there's going to be a lot of money there, but we are hoping to identify businesses that are not required to close but are suffering on the back of this dreadful pandemic.
Yeah, and that's all you can do, isn't it? You can just do your best. And because I was going to say that, just to emphasise, Rossendale hasn't got £30 million.
No,
you've got a small portion of
I
that.
wish.
How much of a challenge is it? Because there's the Borough Council, and then you've got to link in with the County Council, the Lancashire County Council. How much of a challenge is it kind of working both together?
It depends what it is. At officer level, there's some very good relationships. Politically, we work really, really well together with the recent negotiations with government and got an agreement across 15 councils, which is quite unusual these days.
There's a coup in itself almost.
Well, it was quite extraordinary, but I think it was a bit of a Hobson's choice.
Right.
With much of it anyway. But we did work well together. There are issues with personalities, unfortunately. At the end of the day, we ought to be working for our residents and our businesses and bugger the politics, frankly. But it does come into it from time to time. There's not a lot you can do about it. The two-tier system has had its day. It doesn't serve our residents well. And, personally, I would advocate a change in local government structures. It just doesn't do a job for us anymore, Peter, in my view.
Right. But whatever can be done to serve best the people of the valley.
We will work at it because it's in our residents' interest to do that. But I think we suffer a little bit from being a very small district council, and of course the county's a very big shire county. So their organisation's huge, our organisation's small, and I think that creates its own problems at times as well.
You're a lady who loves a challenge, basically.
Well, it's very, very difficult because, of course, most of the money raised in Rossendale in terms of council tax goes straight to Preston.
Straight over,
So again, that's a frustration to me because people think that we're responsible for everything and that we get all this money. And the reality is we get 16% of every pound that they pay. We get 16 pence. And the vast majority of services, or the bigger services, are actually provided
at county level. So, and I think we need to keep emphasising that because people don't realise that the council do everything, basically. Okay. One very simple question. Will we ever get a swimming pool back in Haslingden?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a difficult one, actually. And it's really difficult around regeneration in the town centres because of our geography. We're not like your average place. You go to Burnley and it's Burnley town centre and you have to give some consideration to Padiham. But if you do that, you've covered it, really. Where in a place like Rossendale, the way we are spread out around along those valley bottoms, it's really, really difficult. And again, 5th smallest district council in the northwest, and certainly not in a position to run 3 swimming pools because that's what we were doing. So we don't have the resource to do that, unfortunately. And in most places that wouldn't be needed, but in a place like Rossendale, you could argue it is needed.
Just purely for the geography of the valley.
So I'd love to say that you would get a swimming pool at some point, but given the financial picture that we work with, I think it's very difficult to say that anything other than the current situation, but very, very hard for an area to run more than 1 or 2 swimming pools, I'd say.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's have some music.
Like us on Facebook.
Facebook.com/Rossendale Radio.
And follow us on Twitter @Rossendale Radio.
Proud to be your local radio station. 104.7 Rossendale Radio, Lancashire.
I've got a question. It's a bit of a long question, but bear with me. Thank you to Sarah Jane Clegg, whose messages. She said, according to the Department for Work and Pension, the number of children in the UK living in poverty is roughly the same now as it was in 1997. Towards the end of the tenure of the last Labour government, the numbers have risen in the last couple of years from a steady low throughout the early noughties and mid-tens. With this figure worryingly on the march upwards, again the PM has allocated a sum of 63 million to be distributed among the councils to fight holiday hunger. How much of this pot has Rossendale received, and how will you forward it onto those most in need?
Big question there, thanks to Sarah Jane for sending that. I think 2 significant points and a correction, really. You say towards the end of the tenure of the last Labour government, they actually picked up government role in 97. It wasn't towards the end of their tenure, unless I've misunderstood that question. But I think you're raising a really, really important issue around poverty, particularly child poverty. I did a little bit of research on this because I thought it's dead easy to say what you think rather than make sure you've got the facts. So I went to Joseph Rowntree Foundation site, and a piece of work that they did in 2017-2018 says that children are most likely to live in poverty, 4.1 million on last year's figures, and that's a rise of 500,000 over the last 5 years. Record employment rates are welcome news, but have so far not loosened the grip on in-work poverty. Nearly all the increase is accounted for by children in working families, and that is the bit that I find really, really difficult. Currently, 2/3 of children in poverty are in families where adults in paid employment. The report goes on to say that under current forecasts and policies, child poverty is likely to rise to its highest level in 30 years by 2023-24, and clearly all of this will be compounded by the coronavirus. So a very, very bleak picture indeed. The bit that really bothers me, as I say, well, it all bothers me, but the fact that, you know, some of these children have got working parents and they're still living in poverty is dreadful. I think people don't mind working really, really hard when it works for them, but when they're working really, really hard and it's not working
and
for them,
struggling just to exist,
that is absolutely tragic. So that's my thoughts on that particular issue.
As regards, I think we mentioned earlier,
as
regards the people of Rossendale coming together on it.
Sorry, I'm just about to get to the point around funding that's been given from government through to councils to help support vulnerable people, and we have received £87,000 in emergency assistance grant from government. The council is using this to support vulnerable families effectively in hardship circumstances. A considerable chunk of that has been given to local food banks and food groups, and they are supporting local families not just during school holidays, and it's not just children on free school meals, but they are supporting those families all year round. We've been working closely with them for a number of years, as I said earlier on. The remaining money, as somewhere in the region of £57,000, has been distributed via local community groups to ensure it reaches family who are in need of small levels of funding. And I think we've used the CVS typically to administer much of those grants, and it's £50, £100, and there is a link in terms of how people can access that fund, and I will give you that link.
And what we'll do is we'll put that onto our websites if anybody needs that. And I think that's the thing with particularly with COVID and people are being laid off, made redundant, there is inevitably a gap between them being laid off or for whatever reason they're not working, and then getting onto the benefit system or whatever system it is where they can get some money. There's always a gap in between, and I think this is where the food groups and like the food box system and people like that come in, just to help fill that gap whilst they're waiting to hear for whatever they've applied for, which must be so frustrating.
It's a small help, isn't it? But it must be so scary if you've lost your job, and you know, just dreadful.
Whereas the do I heat or eat is a common thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. I would just plug our Rossendale Work scheme. Actually, again, this is a scheme we've been running for a couple of years now, and this is a scheme where we've partly funded by the DWP and partly by Active Lancashire. It's a partnership scheme, and we're linking unemployed people in Rossendale up to local businesses who've got gaps and vacancies, and we are accelerating that work now, and we're doing quite a lot of work with young people. So again, I'll get those details in contact details for that scheme through to you. Might not be today, but I will get that through, and you can put it on your
we'll get it on the website
page.
Absolutely. And are you finding that these people want to do that? Some people have a perception, they're not bothered about working or whatever. You're finding they're knocking on your door almost saying, come on, help us.
I don't believe that. I think it's just a stereotype, actually. I think people generally, if they're fit and able to work, they want to work. This idea that living on benefits is a doddle is not true.
Absolutely
It is not true. Increases on benefits, benefit rates, there's been no increases apart from this COVID additional £20 that's been given, but there's been no increases on for about 10 years. And this idea that it's easy living on benefits and it's the easy option, I don't think is true.
Not whatsoever.
And I think people, if they're fit and able to work, they are happy to work.
And now there's a fight going on in there to maintain that £20, because we've been saying it's just while COVID's on, but people are fighting to say no, just forget that, keep it there, because it's the old, what do they say, every little helps. It really does, doesn't it, in those cases?
Of course it does.
Good. All right, we'll have a break for a little bit more music, and we'll talk more after this.
The voice of the valley, 104.7 Rossendale Radio.
Let me get back to my guest, Alison Barnes, leader of Rossendale Borough Council. You're a busy lady. You've got. How are you going on with Zoom meetings?
Well, you just have to get on with it, don't you?
They annoy the hell out of me. They really do. And people keep pressing the mute buttons when they shouldn't.
I know. Well, we had a community association meeting on Zoom last night, and it was just really comical, really. We got the business done, and that was the important part.
That's the main bit. But oh dear me, the Zoom must be rubbing their hands. Their share price must have shot through the roof.
I don't know. But apart from businesses that are paying for it, I think everybody else that uses it is somehow somehow doing it for nothing.
Right. Another question we had was what happened to the money which was raised to try and save bake-up baths? People bought a few £1 bricks, as did many others at the time, and then it says, and why, when other small villages like Widnall in Lancashire are able to keep their baths open, yet we've lost both Haslingden and Bake-Up? Well, I think we touched Haslingden earlier, but is there anything about that?
I've no idea what happened to the pound of brick. It comes up from time to time, and it was before my time, and I just have no idea what happened to that.
Right, simples. Okay, next. Simple as that. Okay. Excuse me. In regard to COVID and all the work that your council officers are doing across the valley, how are they managing coping with it? Obviously, they can't stop it. Is it the council? We see the figures are rising, going up and down, but at the moment, Rossendale's one of the highest for incidences, isn't it? Is that collated through the council?
Well, we get that data, and we have a Lancashire outbreak board which meets weekly, Monday morning, first thing normally. Then we have a local outbreak board where we coordinate Rossendale activity around this. There's various officers of the council there, because it touches on several different departments and different people. We've got the police there, we've got health there, we occasionally have a representative from the county council there as well, and we just try and work out what more we can do to try and get the messages across. I mean, the figures are really alarming at the moment, and I would just say to people, just do everything you can. And I don't think for a moment people aren't doing everything they can, but we do need to double down, really. And it's not even for the impact it's having locally, although it will be having an impact. It's the impact it's having on our health services. We know, for instance, the Royal Blackburn, it's got one of the busiest A&E departments in the country normally. So that hospital is under real pressure, as are our other Lancashire hospitals, and it's trying to stop that getting to a situation where they can't cope. So that's one of the big messages, really. I recognise I do understand that it's difficult not to. You've got children of school age. A lot of it's coming through that way. So it's really, really hard, to completely seal yourself off.
Yeah,
but I would just ask people to just do everything they can.
And with the hospitals, as well as that, all the normal ailments that happen at this time of year, flu and everything else, is still there.
Exactly. They've got added pressure, winter pressures anyway. And unlike at the beginning of the pandemic, they are trying to carry on with the everyday illnesses, the things that were,
the normal appointments.
Exactly. And they don't want to drop any of that. They're having to do that, unfortunately, for some things, but they really want to carry on doing the things that they would normally do as much as possible. So, and the only way we can help them with that is to just follow the advice and try really, really hard not to do anything where you're putting yourself at risk.
And putting it bluntly, for God's sake, use some common sense. Yeah.
And I don't think for a moment that the vast majority of people are not doing that.
No.
I think they are. But I mean, I heard from a resident recently, and a local business owner, 3 children at 2 different schools, off work for 6 weeks.
Just the timing of the isolation.
The way it worked out, and you think, good grief, you know. And there's nothing you can do about that. That is just the way it is. I do get all that. I really do.
I certainly know. My daughter works in it. She's a teacher. Another one's a TA, and similar has happened with them. They've had a fortnight with my daughter. Her husband was isolated for a fortnight, and then instantly the day he went back, she was isolated. But in the meantime, there's still childcare and everything to sort out.
You've still got to perform a small miracle every day, which is family life. Get everybody up, out to school or whatever. Get yourself to work and the dog out for all of those things that we have to do just on a day.
That thing called living. Listen, Alison, that's been really, really good. I think we can wind things up nicely from that. Thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate it. Thank you for answering the questions.
My pleasure.
We'll take the details from you and make sure they're put on our website so that if people want to contact the council or yourself or whatever, we'll put all that information on there. But it's been fascinating, and we'll look forward to it.
My pleasure. I'm happy to come back whenever you want me.
We will welcome you. Thanks, Alison.
104.7 Rossendale Radio.